I never thought a single day could change everything I believed about family, love, and trust. My name is Aisha, and for as long as I can remember, I thought I knew what home meant. Growing up, I watched my father pour his heart into the house we lived in, every corner filled with memories, laughter, and love. After he passed away unexpectedly, the world around me felt like it had crumbled into dust. I was alone, or at least that's what I believed. The grief was suffocating. I could barely breathe without thinking about the conversations, the advice, the small gestures that I would never hear again. And then came the words that hit me harder than any loss could. They said the property belongs to the Blood family after his death. I remember feeling my heart stop, my hands trembling as I read that official notice. Blood family? Wasn't I his daughter? Hadn't I lived in that house, breathed that air, and grown under his care? But according to the law, and apparently according to some distant relatives I had never really known, I wasn't entitled to anything. I wanted to scream, to fight, to deny the world, but something inside me held back. I realized in that moment that anger wouldn't bring back my father, nor would it undo the betrayal written in legal words and delivered by cold voices. I walked through the rooms of the house that had been my sanctuary. Each photo on the wall, each old book on the shelf seemed to whisper stories of a life I was being forced to leave behind. I could almost hear my father's voice, soft but stern. Aisha, you are stronger than you think. Trust yourself. But what I didn't know that day was that my journey had only begun. Those distant relatives, the so-called blood family, had no idea that the girl they dismissed so easily was about to shake their world in ways they would never forget. Because grief can break you, yes, but grief can also awaken something far more powerful, determination. And I was about to discover a strength I never knew I had. At first, I tried to reason with them. I called, I visited, I begged, not for sympathy, but for what was rightfully mine. Every attempt was met with polite smiles hiding disdain and whispers behind my back that made my skin crawl. They don't belong here. They aren't real heirs, one cousin said, barely hiding a smirk. Each conversation chipped away at my composure. I felt exposed, like a child standing in the middle of a courtroom, powerless against the weight of family and law. Nights were the hardest. I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, asking myself why blood relations mattered more than love, trust, and memories. And then came the betrayal that cut deeper than any legal notice ever could. My father's lawyer, the man I had trusted to guide me, secretly sided with them. I found out through a casual remark at a gathering, the kind that leaves your chest tight and your stomach heavy. He had been sending them updates, whispering advice, and subtly steering decisions to favor my so-called relatives. I felt the walls of the world closing in. I was shattered, alone, and completely underestimated. Everyone thought I would crumble, that I would accept defeat. But in those silent nights, as I traced the edges of my father's old ledger and letters, I realized something vital. They had forgotten one thing. I knew this house better than anyone. I understood its history, its debts, its secrets, and that knowledge could be my weapon. I began quietly. I reviewed old documents, visited offices, spoke to people my father had trusted. I discovered loopholes, inconsistencies, and opportunities the others had overlooked. Every revelation fueled me, turning grief into determination, despair into strategy. They celebrated every small victory, thinking they had won, not realizing that I was always 2 steps ahead. My heart ached with every lie, every betrayal, but it also burned with a quiet fire. I was no longer the girl they dismissed. I was someone who had been tested by loss and betrayal and emerged sharper, smarter, and unafraid. The day finally came when I stepped into the courtroom, not with tears or pleas, but with confidence and undeniable proof.
I watched as their smug smiles faded with each page I presented, each witness I called, each fact I revealed. "You see," I said quietly, looking at their faces, "this house was never just about blood. It was about care, trust, and the life my father built, and I have the right to honor that." The judge didn't just rule in my favor, he dismantled every claim, exposing their greed and deceit. My so-called relatives sat there, mouths open, eyes wide, realizing that underestimating me had been their gravest mistake. I walked out of that courtroom with my head high, the weight of grief still present, but tempered by a sense of justice. It wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. I hadn't sought to humiliate or destroy them, but I had reclaimed my dignity, my home, and my truth. That in itself was the sweetest revenge. Sitting in the house afterward, I ran my fingers along the walls, touching memories both painful and beautiful. The betrayal had hurt me, yes, but it had also shown me that strength isn't born from comfort, it's forged in fire. And as I gazed out the window at the garden my father loved, I realized the most important lesson of all. Family isn't just about blood, it's about love, respect, and the courage to stand for what is yours, no matter what anyone else says. In the end, I didn't just survive betrayal, I became unstoppable, and that is a feeling that no one can ever take away.